Alright guys, welcome back. So we're working on an Aisin transmission control module out of a Saab 9.3. We want to be able to increase the transmission's requested torque to the engine while the brake pedal is pressed. Right now it's limiting it to around like 200 Newton meters of torque when the brake pedal is pressed. The guy that sent me the files wanting to increase his track time and be able to hold his brake, build more boost on the line, and then be able to launch the car harder. So we're going to go through really quick and just cover some of the basic disassembly that I've done, and we're going to look at some values and some techniques that we're going to try to employ in order to find these torque limiters. He identified some torque limiters and sent them to me. So this is a torque by gear. We want to see the function that's calling it. So I labeled this function torque request. This pointer is being offset by the value of uvar4. So when uvar4 is equal to 2, we're going to see 0, 1, and 2. And this value right here is going to be loaded into pp_uvar8. If this is equal to 0, then it's going to be the pointer itself. So I went ahead and labeled whatever's writing to uvar4 as might be gear. I think it is certainly the value of what gear you're in, or some variant of that. pp_uvar8 in this statement right here is either equal to the value at this ROM address, okay, which in decimal, this 4E20 comes out to 20,000. Okay, and you'll notice this is referenced like 103 times. Every single time that I find this being referenced, it is a torque function of some sort that's referencing it. So a guy could spend a lot of time going through all these functions and tracking down more torque limiters of some sort. We're trying to stay somewhat focused and keep our time low on this project. But we will see at the bottom, we see a return lesser of pp_uvar5 or pp_uvar8. We already looked at what writes to pp_uvar8. We should take note of more tables here, okay? And these tables I am labeling as conditions in Winols. So you'll notice that if this RAM address is less than whatever offset of this pointer, and if this RAM address is less than whatever offset of this pointer, then this statement is true. And then if this statement is true here, then we will move on to writing pp_uvar8 back to its original, 20,000 that we saw right up in here. pp_uvar5 is the other option. It's kind of the same thing going on here. So you'll see our pointer and we'll see the offset from the pointer. But in this case, it says return lesser of either the value offset by this pointer or uvar2. And uvar2 is written to by this function. This function is absolutely insane. I am not sure exactly what this function does, and I don't think that we're going to get into what this function does. I think we're going to find our answer somewhere other than that. We have the condition statements again, except it's a variable, a local variable. We'll see that this RAM address needs to be less than ivar7. ivar7 is written to by svar1. svar1 will take on the value of either this decimal, which will be found right here, that's in Winols, or it will take on this array again at an offset of the gear selector yet again. So these are two duplicate bits of code effectively. All of this is in Winols now, so we can play around with it. These two pointers, these sets of arrays or whatever you want to call them, are definitely what is writing to the outcome of this function. So we're going to select the lesser of these two values and we're going to load it into uvar2, and uvar2 will then be returned to whatever function calls this function, torque request function. So the only one that's calling it is this function we've labeled torque request loop. So we have a few things going on in this function. The first thing we should look at is up here at the top, pp_uvar5. is being written to by that default torque of 20,000 again, okay? Then we have this if statement right here, and if param1 is equal to 0, this will be executed, this will be skipped, and then this RAM address will take on the value of pp uvar5, which is default. If this is other than 0, that is when this loop will be executed. And this loop, you'll see pp uvar3 is taking on this @ sign denotes the address at this pointer, not the value within the function that it's returning. Okay, then that is being loaded into PC var2. PC var2 then loads into uvar, and now I believe that we're making it to the value found at the function found at this pointer. Okay, so it'll return the lesser of pp var5, which is this value currently, and uvar1. That is written back into this same variable again. This value is written into 7a2. If 7a2 is less than 2000, bvar equals 1 because this statement is true. The value at bvar4 is written into this RAM address that we have labeled if torque is less than 20,000, this RAM address will equal 1. Okay. Additionally, pp uvar5 is then loaded into torque request as it was before. It's just choosing whether it's going to be the value here or the value here. We should take a minute to note that it appears that this loop is also selecting, or may be also selecting, between any one of these functions. These may or may not override the torque request found in the function that we looked at the very beginning of the video. We may have to end up digging into the rest of these functions, but we're going to do a little code patching and data logging before we dig into all of these. So this torque request RAM address is then read out by torque request selection. So this is that RAM address. We'll dive into this a little bit. So here's the other RAM address we also saw in that last function. So if torque is over 20,000, or this statement is true, meaning max torque 1 is less than requested torque, then max torque 1 will be written into SVAR2. We also have the same statement here. It is selected based on this RAM address right here. We're not going to get into that right now. So if this RAM address is true, then this section of code takes place. If this line of code is false, then we move on to this section. Again, we have this first segment making sure that requested torque is under 20,000, or if max torque 2 is less than requested torque, then we are going to write max torque 2 into SVAR2. If none of these statements are true, then SVAR2 will equal the original torque request that we've identified. SVAR2 is then loaded into what I am calling requested torque. Again, we're really trying to hone in on what is affecting the torque request when the brake pedal is applied. We're going to do some code patching here. So we're going to look at this compare symbol right here. This is the instruction, compare GE. We have identified these bytes in Winols to be able to do a code patch. So we're going to say, rather than GE, we're going to say EQ. And we are going to change this BF, which is branch if false, to branch if true. Okay. What we've done is, if this statement is true and we do indeed use this first section of code to write to our torque request effectively, then all we're going to do is make sure that max torque, or sorry, requested torque is under 20,000, and then regardless of this being true or false, torque request is going to end up into SVAR2. So if it's equal, then we will write max torque 1 into SVAR2. So although it is a different RAM address being written into, we do have to ensure that this max torque 1 is equal to torque request for it to be the one to be written into SVAR2. Jumping down here, we're going to do the same thing really quick. So we're going to patch this compare GE to compare EQ. And then contrary to last time, we are going to branch if false rather than its current branch if true. And there we have it. So if this statement is false and we move on to this line of code, then we are going to confirm that torque is under 20,000, or we're going to ensure that max torque 2 is equal to torque request before writing max torque 2 to SVAR2. If this statement is false, we are again back to torque request into SVAR2. With this patch, regardless of pretty much anything except for this right here, which I do have this in Winols, these F's right here. If this, and this statement is true, then SVAR2 is going to be written by FFFF. This is editable in Winols, so we can have total control over that also. Third patch goes back into our torque request loop. And we need to check out param1. So again, param1, if it's equal to 0, we are going to bypass this loop. Let's look at the functions that call it. So in this torque might be main 2, torque requested loop, param1 is 0. This certainly isn't going to be causing a torque cut, as while that is 0, it's going to be writing 20,000 to 78A. So let's look at this other function. So torque might be main function, right? We'll see that a 1 is being written to torque request loop. It does appear that this entire function is dedicated to requested torque. So you're going to have, torque cut due to like trans, slip. You're going to have torque cut due to probably temperature. If you have DTCs, you're definitely going to have torque cut request from the transmission. So there's a lot going on here. I don't think it would be effective to reverse engineer every single last one of these functions. So that's why we're looking at OS patches and data logs. So to OS patch this to set our, we're going to effectively use it to skip this loop. Okay. So we're going to set this torque request to a default of 20,000. We would patch this address right here. So we're going to patch instruction, and we are going to write an OXO. And you'll see now torque request loop, param1 will have a 0 written to it. This statement will become true, and this code will be executed. This will equal 20,000. So I have a bunch of different, 2D quote-unquote tables, just these arrays that I was showing you guys in that first function. I have a couple 3D tables that are, requesting a torque cut. So if none of these limiters that I have identified get him the change that he's looking for, he will at least be able to do these patches and then data log and get us looking in the right direction. These limiters that we're going to OS patch over become very complex and extend quite a distance through a lot of different functions. So we're definitely going to want to narrow down on which one of these RAM addresses is causing the break applied torque cut. Thanks for watching. Go ahead and hit the like and subscribe if you find this content interesting, and I'll try to do my best to keep it coming.